That was impressive. Thanks everyone for getting quiet so early. Thank you everybody for braving the rain and joining us today. It's so incredible to see so many people in this room for what I think is going to be an incredible conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event featuring David Hollander, the author of How Basketball Can Save the World, 13 Guiding Principles for Reimagining What's Possible. I'm Alicia Jessop. I'm an associate professor of sport administration here at Pepperdine. I'd like to thank the Institute for Entertainment, Media, and Sports, Payson Library, and the Sport Business Association for their sponsorship and contributions to this event. We live in challenging times. War, pandemic, famine, technology, climate change, human rights. Can a game played on asphalt with a rubber ball provide a roadmap to navigate these matters? Through a thought-provoking course at NYU, David has explored this conversation with NBA and WNBA superstars, Hall of Fame athletes, coaches, and leading cultural figures. James Naismith penned 13 original rules to basketball. Guided by conversations in his class, David has identified 13 principles from the game that can change the world as we know it. The Assistant Dean of Real World and Clinical Professor at the Preston Robert Tisch Institute for Global Sport, David Hollander is an award-winning professor whose class, by the same name as his book, has received global media attention and even swayed the Vatican to recognize a patron saint of basketball. I hope he talks about that. If not, read the book. An advisor to top brands in marketing, sports, entertainment, culture, and education, David holds a bachelor from Brandeis University and a JD from Quinnipiac University School of Law. He's an amazing man. I could spend the next hour discussing his bio. I don't think anyone wants to hear anything more from me. So please welcome David Hollander, our esteemed guest today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was so nice. Just before I begin, I want to thank Alicia for bringing me and all of you for just such a warm, seamless, enjoyable. I've already met some students for lunch, and it was fantastic. But really, and I could even walk out now, as a lifelong, before I talk about basketball, as a lifelong New York Mets fan, to be in the Seaver School at the Payson Library. That's it, man. I can go to heaven. This is what I've been thinking about for a long time. So next book. Before I begin, it's the Seaver Library. Yeah. If somebody asks me who's Tom Seaver, I'm not gonna, yeah, no, that friendship ended. Let me show you just a short film and then I'll begin, okay? If I walk by a basketball court, I'll stop to hear basketball sound, to watch people play, to lose myself, forget time. My name is David Hollander. I'm an assistant dean of the program at NYU called Real World. I teach a very popular course called How Basketball Can Save the World. The fast break is the ultimate expression of a human being moving through a change and trying to figure out what you have to do in order to meet the needs of the changing facts and circumstances that develop in front of you with other people. I wish I could teach that in a leadership course. I wish I could teach that in a corporate culture course. Unlike other sports, basketball is a small space. It's intimate. It forces us to see each other. Other sports, big space. Baseball, a person might not even touch each other the entire game. Anybody can touch the ball. Anybody can do anything with the ball. There's never been a more anti-hierarchical structure intentionally created. So you enter this space in pickup with complete strangers. Complete strangers. It's the beauty of pickup basketball. Everybody says, oh, I can play it anywhere. Because you can. And at the onset of the pandemic, all over the world, people would not stop playing one thing, and that was basketball. It was a global issue that if they didn't take down the rims, people would not stop going to that intimate space. And when I leave that space, if I see somebody, anybody, who I was in that space with, and I could be in a laundromat, deli, I'll look at them and they'll look at me. We'll be like, hey, that's it. Because we know what we are to each other. It's like dancing. It's like singing. It's like a drum circle, except it's basketball. And for me, it's better. So that was made by my friends from Bristol Studio. They're an LA-based basketball lifestyle and apparel company. They speak my language, or I speak their language. Or maybe it's just the language. And it's a language I've been speaking since I was probably 6 years old. When my dad he decided to make a 15 by 15 foot asphalt square in our backyard and put a real like 4-stanchion basketball, backboard and net, and I started playing with my siblings and then my friends, and then kids from the neighborhood, and then kids I'd never seen before just start showing up. And in that space is where I learned this language. It's the language I spoke with my brother through his dyslexia, and he played pro basketball internationally. It's probably the one language my sister and I share. It's the same one we shared when we hustled those guys in Riverside Park. It's the language of my solitude, my enjoyment of myself. Where I'd go out there all day, all night, and then the sun would come down and the dusk would meet the asphalt, and I was young and indestructible. And I wasn't coming in for dinner. One more shot, Mom. There'd be another one and another one. It's a language that I learned from the old men who played in our local rec league and guys getting off work in the playground. I was 12 years old. They treated me like an equal, like one of them. And I learned how to speak correctly that language. It's not a verbal language exactly, It's the language of like eye contact, of peripheral vision. It's how to move in space, to share space, to manage space, move my body with other bodies. It's the way I walk in the street now. It's the way I move in the subway. It's the way I manage the airport. And wherever I've gone in the world, and I've gone through, from the Shanghai to the Middle East, to Houston, to Boston, to all over New York City, I've tried to find that space where they spoke that language. And even today, still today, it's my sanctuary. Place I go, and the whole world goes away, and the best parts of myself are integrated, and I feel peace, I feel balance. My relations with others gets right. The world makes sense. And the funny thing is when I talk to other people who play basketball like that, they feel the same thing. They say, yeah, that's how I feel too. That's what happens to me. That's why I got to go there. And as I saw the world around 2016 breaking down, widening irreconcilable differences, failing institutions, no trust, I said, could I take this language that I speak, these feelings that I have that other people feel and that language other people know, and could I somehow apply it to fix that brokenness? Well, I'm a college professor. That's what I'm supposed to do. So I took this thesis and I did the research and I built the syllabus and I thought about what basketball is intended to be, how it's operated in the world, what the world has told us it means, and I gave it words. I codified it, the game, what it stands for as a philosophy with these 13 principles. vocabulary, voice, structure, and award-winning playwrights, peacemakers, filmmakers, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists, the leaders of First Nations, a premier mezzo-soprano opera singer, plus some of the greatest basketball players you've ever heard of, came to class. And with the students, we explored, we enriched, we validated these principles, and it's no longer an if to me. This is exactly how. And I'll walk through them in summary fashion right now. The first one just sounds like something you've heard since you were a kid. It sounds so trite. So yeah, cooperate, I know. But it's very different in a basketball space, which is a small space. And in a small space, you see each other. And when you really see each other, immediately, continuously, fluidly, you humanize the person with you. You actually see them for exactly who they are. The Mojave poet, Pulitzer Prize-winning MacArthur genius, Natalie Diaz, who played in 2 Final Fours, said, I could go to a basketball court and not know anybody. And immediately I start to find ways of knowing them and them knowing you. It's like enacting a family. And when you do that, when you're thinking about each other and looking at each other and humanizing each other and actually seeing each other, you develop that cooperation superpower called empathy. And then when you have empathy, you start to think about, okay, well, how much is this about me? And how much is this about everybody else? And what's the right balance of that? And in basketball, that's just a constant negotiation, a constant evaluation of what am I to do here? And how does this help everyone else? And you know, when the game was created, it was created in a time called the Gilded Age. Unprecedented wealth inequality. The balance was off. Naismith, he had left divinity, he had graduated divinity school and actually forsook the ministry because he thought this was a better way. This was a social response as much as an athletic response to the imbalance of that time. Steph knows that without Draymond, there are no championships, even though Steph has those, spectacular moments of incredible statistics. Draymond's statistics can be this or that, but there is no championship with no Draymond, and there is no championship with no Steph, and both understand what each matters, the value of both in the chain. That's the kind of society Naismith was trying to build. So it's not just the tech entrepreneur, it's not the billionaire, only those that matter, only those that get the spotlight. It's everyone in the chain, and that creates a space of dignity. You have that kind of dignity, then everybody gets included. Basketball is the only goal that is elevated. And because it's elevated, all the sports before that were about like power and speed. I can get past you, I can get over you. Well, basketball values that, but it also says you have to be under control. You can have different kinds of skills, which brought in different kinds of athletic types, different kinds of bodies, which stands for the principle that maybe there's all kinds of leadership archetypes, not just the loud, the charismatic, the handsome. It's an inclusion principle. It's an enlightened human resource management principle for the 21st century. And when you have all kinds of different people with all kinds of different leadership qualities sitting at a table, well, then it's not just, I belong here, but what else can I be? They like to talk about positionless basketball today. That's the state of the game, right? Positionless basketball, unicorns, 7-footer who can do it all. That was always what the game was meant to be like. There are no positions in basketball. In fact, when Naismith had his last disciple, the last person he talked about the game with was the guy named John McClendon, who was the first African-American to be admitted to the physical education program in Kansas. And he took McClendon too, playground, they watch kids play basketball, no coaches, no, and he said, what do you see? And McClendon said, well, I see they attack the basket when they have the ball, and when the other team has the ball, they attack them. Yep, that's the game, Naismith said, and he walked away. And McClendon went on and created something called the fast break. The fast break, where there are no positions, because it's happening too fast. You just have to be whatever you have to be in the moment, wherever anybody is, whatever who's behind you, you solve in the changing facts and circumstances. That's the future of work. That's the future of your career inside the organization. We know now that people graduate will change their jobs 6 or 7 times. Maybe their entire career field 3 or 4 times. Maybe the entire field will be obsolete as the world changes so rapidly, technologically, legally, politically. Are you going to understand how to run the break? Are you going to understand to be what you need to be in order to meet the changing needs of a world that's changing all the time? And when you do, you delimit yourself. And when you delimit yourself, when you realize that none of us are just one thing, well, then you have a chance at really changing everything. Then you have a chance at being something else entirely than you thought you ever would be. In sports, they like to talk a lot about team chemistry, right? You hear that all the time, team chemistry. Team chemistry means he's like this, she's like that. We put them on the same team. That'll be a good combination, him being like this and her being like that. That'll work. Alchemy means he's like this, she's like that, and together they will both become something else that they never would have been except for the effect that they have on each other being together. Great basketball players don't just make each other better, they make each other different and thus better. It's the same for us. You probably spent some time in the pandemic. Remember that thing? We were all sitting around, in various states of distress and isolation, and we said, when this thing is over, things are going to change. Things are going to be different, right? We're going to reset the economy. We're going to reform we're going to imagine well, how's it going to happen if you're still the same and the institutions are still the same? The way it works is you must alchemize. You must become something else. If you become something else, then the institutions will necessarily become something. And when the institutions are something else, they'll ask you to be and that is how a society, like a basketball team, alchemizes. When you have that alchemy, those first 5 principles are what I call the human development principles. It's who you have to be, who you become. And when you reach that state, then you can do the next 6, which are all about social change, the social change we all want to talk about, right? How do we solve global problems? Well, you have to make it global. You have to make your perspective global. Basketball, people think the dream team, right? That was in 1992. That's when everything went global. No, when James Naismith invented the game, James Naismith was from Scotland. His parents were from Scotland. He was from Canada. Inventing the game in Massachusetts, as fast as he could, he sent someone to Tianjin, China, to Brazil, to Paris, to Australia. They were playing basketball in 1895, already there. He spent 19 months in Paris, going all over Western Europe in World War I to rehabilitate soldiers, and ended up just spreading basketball all over the world. There's so many things that affect us all, right? Climate, water, disease, hunger. There's no way just one nation state can solve that for the whole thing. Basketball is meant to be global from the start. The mindset of your next plan, policy, program, it has to be global from the start. A lot of people also don't know that when Naismith first invented the game, he was gender inclusive. 2 weeks into him showing the guys how to play basketball, and they were all like running up and down the court and doing this weird game. And there was the Buckingham grade school teachers would come have their lunch, women, and watch the guys play. And like 2 weeks in, 2.5 weeks in, nobody's quite sure. The archives at Springfield and I've gone through them, are not so clear, but it was around that, only couldn't have been more than 2.5 weeks. They go up to Naismith, the women, and they're like, can we play? And he's like, yeah, why not? From the, no hesitation, from the jump, women were included, of course. Naismith meant this to be a totally gender inclusive thing. He married one of the original female basketball players because they started playing basketball at Smith College right down the road just a few weeks later. And the first women's basketball game was in 1896, Berkeley versus Cal. 1890, when did they get the right to vote? This is 30 years before any of that. How wildly progressed. On the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, which is like the ultimate Americana magazine, you've never heard of it probably. Norman Rockwell was the great, he'd make these portraits. On the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, the most American thing you could possibly have in like 1907 is a portrait of basketball woman. You know, the International Lady Garments Union thing? This is like 30 years before that. Too bad the world did not follow Naismith's gender inclusive, fundamental to basketball. But I can tell you that that's what the game stands for. And I can tell you that if we don't do that going forward, if you have some policy or plan or idea and it's not gender inclusive at its core from the start, it will fail. It will fail. Because that's not what the 21st century is about. These are our friends, these are our sisters, these are our mothers, our aunts. They are us. Every place has gender, and different places have different othering, exclusions. They could be racial, they could be ethnic, they could be religious. Naismith's whole thing was that this game needs to be like no barrier to access. It's the only sport I know you can just go play by yourself. That's how easy it is. But he wanted it to be able to be played like on almost any surface. You needed very little, easy to play. Easy to play. Oh my God, I just saw you. Easy to play. A big round ball. And if you think about it, it's pretty easy to play compared to a lot of other games. Like almost anybody can do it. He wasn't thinking this was going to be a professional league. He wasn't thinking about making money. He was thinking about all kinds of people who were not given access. How many places in society have no barriers to access where it's easy to start a business, easy to buy a home, easy to get an education, easy to get health care, as it is for anybody to have that access? The greatest example I know is, we can go right to it, the unresolved issue, core issue in the United States of race. The denial of access to Black Americans has essentially been the denial of ownership. And what spaces have been completely accessible? Well, when the church started breaking down and schools weren't doing what they're supposed to do, the playground, the space of playground basketball, which I will submit to you is the last best, most inclusive communal experience there is left. Nobody checks your ID, nobody checks, no credit check, no passport, no gatekeeper, no commissioner. What are the rules? The rules are those that are assented to by those who are present. That's it. And in that space, those who were denied access could exercise ownership of their commercial, their entrepreneurial, their creative, their sense of self-determination. And when you have a space that's so easy to access like that, all kinds of people can come there and demonstrate their belonging. When Naismith invented the game, he was industrialization, a time where people were in cramped spaces, and it was not just an unprecedented wealth inequality moment in America, unprecedented immigration. Jews from Eastern Europe and Catholics from Southern Europe. They would come to the country and they weren't given access to the fields, the clubs, all kinds of things. Where could they go to show not only they belonged, that they deserved, equal treatment? It was the space of the basketball court. Now you say, well, that might have been cool 130 years ago. Really, can basketball be a solve for global immigration issues? Look at Canada. Go to Canada, the country that takes more immigrants pound for pound than any other country in the world. And yeah, when the Raptors won, that was this fantastic moment of national jubilation and unity. But Canadians were galvanizing around basketball on the street long before that. New Canadians from all different countries. They come with very little. Where can they go? That needs very little. Basketball, the promise of basketball as a social institution, as much as an athletic institution, it's happening in Canada. Could that work in Marseille or Malmo or Essen, Germany, or Phoenix? I think a basketball immigration policy can and should, and it's been proven it does in Toronto. There's so many divisions, that exist that are acute to the 21st century. Urban and rural is one of them. People in urban and rural communities don't vote the same. They don't watch the same television. They don't like the same foods. They don't laugh the same jokes. People are picking up and moving to either an urban or rural community so they can be around people who like the same things as them and talk the same way and think the same way. How do you get and by the way, it's not just the United States. It's all over the world. All the same issues persist with these urban and rural divisions. Is there anything that urban and rural can unite around? Well, I know one thing that is equally beloved in Kansas, Kentucky, and Indiana as it is in Harlem, Compton, Watts. That's the game of basketball. And it is proof that if there is one thing, there is a thing. And if there is a thing, then there could be another thing. And we can begin to build upon the idea that there is a thing and there can be more common understanding. Because the other acute 21st century problem, and you've been reading all the CDC statistics lately, they're very distressing, is where can people go to escape what seems to be kind of an inescapable loneliness? Or a mounting sense of I can't connect. You talk to people who play basketball, historically, it's why do you love this game? And why is it so important to you? They say, well, it's the only space I could go where I felt safe. It's the place I went where I could just kind of be okay, no matter what their particular circumstances were. And you say, well, really, is that the space that's going to connect us all, that's going to change us all? Well, I ask you, what happened recently in the pandemic when they took away those spaces? They said, you can't go hang out with other people, right? They're like, if you do, you could die. And so isolate, social distance, just stay away from each other. What was the one thing that you can't do without, one thing that people had to do and wouldn't stop doing, even though at that time there was no vaccine or anything. It was a threat to their life. They kept playing basketball. They kept playing basketball. The mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, was like, do not go to basketball courts. The governor of New York was like, public service announcements. They had to go all over the world and screw down the rims. They were not excavating bocce courts. They were not tearing up the, tennis nets. That's how important this space is. I had Bessel van der Kolk. You ever heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score? Dr. Bessel van der Kolk has redefined how we understand trauma. He says more people have it than we think. And trauma is post-traumatic stress disorder is a terrible thing. Even though the trauma happened in the past, it feels like it's happening right now and everything's a threat and it's a searing sense of isolation. It's very hard to connect What are the one space? What are the spaces he says work? Well, he says rhythmic social activities, dancing together, singing together, and basketball. The guy came to my class. His book is like on the 400-week bestseller list because it's that important. We need to find spaces that replace isolation and loneliness with connection and imagination. That's what happens when you play basketball. Because these last two principles, they're how we get to tomorrow. You don't only need a space to feel connection. Well, you just need a space to feel yourself. Harder and harder these days, with all the digital, oppression. You're being surveilled, you're being tracked, you're being counted, your data is being algorithmatized, everything you do. And where can you go? Seriously, where can you? I got my phone on me right now. I got to respond. Where can you go where you can just be and have your own experience that belongs to nobody else but you? So many people say that basketball is that sanctuary space. So many people say they find, maybe it's the continuous movement. I don't know, the small space, you have to be present really in basketball the entire time. What we're talking about is simply play. Play, people like to say, well, play in sports is like real life. Sports is like life. It's not. It's actually not. It's the opposite. Life is sprawling, incomprehensible, unpredictable. Play is very specific in locality and duration. Rules are supreme. There's no rules in life. There really aren't. You can break. It's and so you can experience and demonstrate the full range of human vice and virtue. You can be the leader, the coward, the teammate, the champion, without the real life consequences of loss, hunger, shelter, heartbreak. We need that space to stabilize our humanity. People talk about mindfulness and meditation. Yeah, that's the space where you start to hear yourself away from all the other stuff that's on you. And that's where the new ideas come from. That's where the truth comes from. That's where the origin of something. The algorithm measures everything you did yesterday and tells you, hey, you did this stuff yesterday, you should do more today. This space, sanctuary space. I was just at Harvard Law School, and I was like, I bet some of you are going to be Supreme Court justices, which is probably true, and I was like, who here will support a fundamental right, a constitutional right to sanctuary? Because it's just a new thing. We can't find that space. They all raise their hand. Because the last thing I'll tell you is that we need to go somewhere else in the 21st century. Basketball is a very special, in a very special and compelling way, is about air. It's about weightlessness. It's about defying gravity. We see what we're capable of as a human race when we go up. How high can we fly? How long can we stay up there? But of course, we know we can't fly. We know gravity is part of our earthly condition. But if our reach does not exceed our grasp, then what's heaven for? Every great society, any society that wants to be great, has to see more than what's simply in front of its face. We have to fly, or we have to dare to fly, which is a dream. It's a basketball dream. And the only way you do that is to leave your feet, is to jump, is to believe you can do something we haven't done before. And I'll just end with one example. In my class, I believe in students. I love teaching. I was reading in the New York Times, 2021 Christmas time, so the Christmas before last, about a village. Yeah, have you heard of this saint of basketball story that she referred to, that Alicia referred to? I read about this village in central Italy that has a church, and in the church is a shrine to basketball. And this church has been around since the 15th century. And people come from all over the country and pray at that shrine for like a better jump shot, a better season, a healed meniscus. It's true. And the village is frustrated because they've made petition to the Vatican to have their local Madonna be recognized as the first ever patron saint of basketball, patroness. And I read this story, I'm like, oh my God, this is me, this is my class, you know? So I call my TA from the year before, who's Italian. And he's living in New York, he's working at NBC Sports. I'm like, Alessandro, I'm like, you believe this? He's like, I know, it's us. He's like, I'm home for Christmas in Bologna. The church isn't that far away. He drives to the church, he grabs a priest. The priest, the first gets my first class to How Basketball Saved the World last year, spring semester. And I'm like, Father, first hour. I'm like, Father, what can I do? How can I help you? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, class for no grade, first hour. I'm like, 157 students. Like, everybody send me one sentence. Why does basketball deserve its own saint? And I put this together in a letter, like a huge letter, like the Declaration of Independence, you know, because basketball knows no country, because of, and I send it to the Pope, right? And I'm like, you know, here goes. Somehow Italian media gets a hold of this, right? La Repubblica. I don't know if you've been to Italy. It's like the New York Times of Italy, and they print the letter in full in this like feature story. It's like this professor and his 157 students is the first international gesture of support for this stalled petition. It could change everything. That was March 2022. On Good Friday, April 12th, the Pope recognized the first ever patron saint of basketball. Now, here's the thing. Why would the Pope do that? I want you to know it's the first team sport, not soccer, to get its own saint. Soccer's pretty popular in Italy. He did it because he understands. He understands it's time for something new. Look, for a millennia, we have been led by the same kinds of leaders. Monarchs, generals, religious types, economists, lawyers, politicians, captains of industry, who've come up with schools of thought to make the world more just, more meaningful, more efficient. Socialism, capitalism, communism, deism, theism, utilitarianism. And where, after a millennia of the same kinds of leaders, with the same kinds of schools of thought, have they gotten us exactly? You're the next. You are the minds who will go into the 21st and 22nd century, I hope, and decide how you want to, what's important. What are the values that are really going to address the problems that are actual in the 21st century? That need addressing, that need solving. No more rinse and repeat. Same problem, different, same but different. Same but different. This is my 10 Commandments. This is my Bill of Rights. This is my Magna Carta. This is my Bhagavad Gita. This is my new way. This is how basketball can save the world. That's it. I'm happy to take questions. There's a microphone. Tell me how ridiculous that really was. Utah State.
So, class. This is obviously a practice down here. How can we expand on what they principle in that one class?
Yeah. Yes. Well, finally, this year, we have a sufficient text. You can hold that up. You can hold that up. No, really, hold it up. which has made the course a lot cleaner. Because yeah, before that, all the research in that book, before I've expressed it this way, what's exactly what we would do. We would go principle by principle or topic by topic. I'd say, today we're going to talk about race, or today we're going to talk about immigration, or today we're going to talk about loneliness. And because as you probably started to think in your own head, well, some of these principles overlap. They must, they have to. It's a progression to it, and they really can't kind of do it right without the others. But the format typically is I will go through one or two principles. It's a 2.5-hour class, once a week. And then in the second hour, I will bring in an urban planner, some mind who's working on some stuff in the world. And we will begin to explore just how this might work. God bless you. Feel free to teach the course.
Because the Zoom friends can't hear if we don't use the mic.
I like that, Zoom friend. It's like the super friend.
Yes, thank you, Professor. My name is Maureen Weston. I'm here with some of my sports law students, and the others are on Zoom today. So really, this was a meditation on the power of sport, and I fully appreciate it. I was saying that, well, it does discriminate against short people, because I remember playing basketball and then everyone grew but me. But in our class, we've spent a lot of time this semester talking about college sports. We're on the eve of March Madness, and the NCAA is making $1 billion on the CBS tournament, and the gamblers are making $4 billion, and they're not even doing anything to contribute to the sport. We're talking about name, image, and likeness, and endorsements, and college athletes which is empowering for the athletes. But also, I think studies show that for the rest of us, a lot of kids quit sports at a very early age. And I love that this is inclusive and Maddie and I were talking about breakdancing entering the Olympics. So having other sports and soccer and Ted Lasso. But how can we have these principles which occur at a young level? And I've also seen studies that said racism and a lot of these they start learning this at 3 to 4 years old. And so by having kids engage, as you discussed, but then people start to quit, and then it becomes a business. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was a lot. But it's interesting that the guy who invented the game never saw it as a commercial proposition. He never made a dime off of it. Many of the legal issues and the structural issues that you were talking about have to do with commercialized expressions of this game. I would like to see the game and all sports. By the way, I love all sports. I think you can learn great things from all different sports. I just happen to think basketball is particularly good at fixing 21st century problems. I would like to see sports elevated to an academic place. It's very interesting to me, and this is how I think solves it, because if the only thing you think sports is good for, I teach in a sports business program. If the only thing you think sports is good for societally at the higher education level is a commercialized expression of it, I think you're really missing the greatest part of the institution. You can get a degree in music. You can get a degree in art. You can get a degree in theater. You can get a degree in dance. And by the way, I think that's good. I think it's right, because through the doing of the thing, you learn a great deal. And part of that degree is the doing of the thing. And off the doing of the thing, you reflect out about all kinds of great issues, culturally, artistically, historically, etc. I don't understand why sports is relegated to a non-academic space. I do not understand how the doing of it is not considered learning, because I know it is. And I think if you change the value, national value of athletics, you will stop kids from quitting and seeing, well, I guess I'm not good at it, so I do it. I'm not good at it. I mean, I do hold my high school record for technical fouls, so I'm pretty proud of that. But I still play, and it gives me peace. I don't do it because I'm going to make the pros. I do it because there's a growth that happens in me. There's a rebalancing, a realignment. I mean, I could make analogies to religion, to yoga, all kinds of things. That's what changes the delta, I don't know, whatever the right, but once you do that, I'm going to give her a little Latin. Res ipsa loquitur. That's for all my law colleagues, because this is a sui generis concept. I'm a lawyer. Somebody, Alicia, somebody. Oh, you got it.
Hi, my name's Kenny. I'm here for a communications class here at Pepperdine. And I think you already answered part of my question, but I was curious as to, I know that basketball seems to be a really big passion for you. And that's probably why this whole thing is happening and this class is being taught at NYU. But I was wondering if you considered talking about any other sports or just sports in general.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to know why specifically it's like how basketball can change the world
Yeah.
and not necessarily how sports can change the world.
Yeah, well, because I think basketball is different than other sports because of the small space, because of the positionlessness, because the small space forces you to see each other, because of the way the game is played. It's almost by the way, Naismith wanted it to be coachless. It's a self-sufficiency program because it's easy to access. Because of all these things it stands for. That's why I think it's especially good. You know, I don't know if you ever heard of Peace Players International. Peace Players International started 20 years ago, something like that. It was a guy who played basketball, Division III basketball, and he went to Ireland, to Northern Ireland. And he started finding that basketball was like a politically neutral sport. And all of a sudden he started seeing it as a way to, kids were getting along with each other who were from opposing factions. And then somebody said to him, you should go to South Africa with that. And he did. And then he started going to all the highest conflict areas, on the globe, Israel, Palestine, Cyprus, Turkey. They're now in like 7 major cities in the country dealing with law enforcement and the breakdown between law enforcement and the communities. They've won every award you could possibly win, all the sports development awards, but the thing is he wasn't satisfied. And he said, I need to really know that this is working. And he did a randomized control test over 8 years. That's the kind of test they do for medicine to see if it really works. And the proof is that it does. Is that they use basketball because it creates ideal relationships for seeing each other. And the results of the test says that all these pro-social behaviors, all these like stand up for people who are not you behaviors, all these going home and being in conversations, being like, yeah, don't say that, Mom. That's not exactly, So that's just one example. I have so many. But you know what? I would teach a course tomorrow on tennis. I would teach a course tomorrow on cricket. The great Franklin Foer, 15 years ago, wrote a book called How Soccer Explains the World. It was more about like a take on globalization, which was something hot at that time. I think all sports are great. I'm here just to prove that basketball is especially good.
Hi, my name is Race. Thank you so much for coming all this way. So one of the things that I just wanted to ask is, with the effect that sport events like the World Cup, Olympics, and World Baseball Classic really bring people together. You mentioned that the actual issues of the 21st century are something that can be addressed with these values. So how would you recommend that like my generation utilizes sports to like address these global issues when the excitement of the sport goes away, when like the World Cup ends and people seem to not be a part of it anymore?
Yeah, it doesn't go away for me, and I don't think it goes away for a lot of people. You know, sports is still. I think the statistic they measured it last year. 82 of the top 100 most watched television shows were live sports. Live sports is the media business. Just so you know, there's nothing people want to watch more than live sports. Why? Is a good question to ask yourself. But I like the depth of your question, which is, okay, well, what else can we do with that? What else can we do with that? What I'm saying is we should institutionalize it at a very young age. It shouldn't just be reading, writing, and arithmetic, but recess. Just play. You shouldn't, you know how they penalize kids? Like, you're not going out for recess. That's what's going to happen. They don't say like, you're not going to math, you know? Like, maybe they should, because it's, that's where I put it. That's where I put it. Man, oh, World Baseball, I love this stuff. Man, I consume it, sure. But I know the reason why it's so compelling is because at its essence, it's so human. There ain't that much of it left, you know, that you find that reaches us like that, that excites us like that. We have no idea what's going to happen unless, what's his name, Tim, whoever's refereeing. Donnie, yes, a little gambling joke there.
This will be our last question because we're coming up on the hour.
Sir, thank you so much. My name's Austin. I'm an alum and I also work here now.
Take it easy.
So I love your approach to all of this. Something that I'm kind of teasing out from an intellectual standpoint now is maybe the global trends of why sports like soccer and basketball that have a universal appeal in our global games, whereas you look at nationally American football and baseball, which are highly specialized sports, you know, where everyone has their thing and there's not a lot of crossover. Everyone has their individual position and they want you to stay in your lane. You're a quarterback, you're gonna be a shortstop, and parents will pay, you know, an obscene amount of money to have their kids from a young age trained to do these very specific things. I'm wondering how much, I'm sorry, I'm formulating this as I'm saying it. Basically, looking at the generation coming up now and how much their buy into games that are more egalitarian kind of is a reflection of the social change going on. Like that we're seeing it reflected in the choices that this generation's making.
I like your theory. I think it's a good formulation on the spot. Let's keep him. Of course. Soccer, look, other than positionlessness, right? Because the goalie has radically different powers than anyone else on the field. And you can't really play it alone. So there's a few differences. That's why I like basketball. Am I convincing you? I got you. All right. But soccer's really easy to play. And there are kind of mini versions of it. And all you need is just like throw down a couple things and that's the goal. And kids in the favelas in Brazil, you know, Rio, they're playing soccer. It's real easy to do. It feels good. And there is a lot of this going on in soccer. There is a lot of like, you know, understanding of each other and movements and things like that. Same with hockey, though there's a little more technical equipment. I hope you're right. I hope that I like to believe that in us is the instinct for inclusion, the instinct for togetherness, the instinct for empathy and connection, not the instinct for like the opposite. So if that is true, I saw there is the NSFIA, the fitness industry, comes out with a study every year, says, now I guess I don't know how they base that exactly, but they say, what's the most popular sport again this year, the most participated sport again this year? Basketball was number one. In the United States, soccer's not far behind. That's the United States. You look at Europe, whoa, you look at South America, whoa. So I hope you're right. I believe that is true. It's just my whole thing is at some point we have to ask, what's the point? Toward what end are our structures, our institutions, are things being built for? Where do we want to end up exactly as a people, as a society, as neighbors, as friends, as family? And all I'm saying, really all I'm saying, this is like a giant effort, a ridiculous creative like burst that says, look at this very simple thing called basketball. That's where I want to get to. If we were all like this, if the world could kind of like deal on this, is it really that complicated? And so I say there's this little game that I know really well, that I still go to, and I find these things where they are just not frequently enough found or absent everywhere else. That's all I'm doing with this course. I'm trying to make, it's a provocation. It's a pretty bold, how basketball save the world. Who does this guy think he is? Yeah, I have the audacity to stand up and say, can we be better? And because I find it all the time when I play this game.